Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Discussing a Murder. This is Jeff Jones, and I'd like to say hello to the panel, starting at the top with Kelly. Hey, Kelly.
Good morning, everyone. It's good to be back. Last episode, so this is going to be a bit of a interesting one. And let's get going.
And Jeff, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great, Jeff. It's good to be back. Looking forward to getting through with this last episode. We're on the precipice of MAM 2 and the entry of Kathleen Zellner onto the scene. I'm very excited for that, and we just have to get past this last, people moping around as they should be episode.
Absolutely, Jeff. MAM 2 is so close, I can almost feel it. And Jack, how you doing today? Did you have some severe weather today?
Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming. And we did have a little bit of severe weather. Not too bad here at the house, but other parts of the county have lost power. So hopefully that won't take long to take care of. But yeah, man, episode 10, it's going to be a trip. Let's do it.
Well, without any further ado, let's hit it.
We had a pretty good idea going into this prosecution, the kind of individual that Mr. Avery was. I think that what Mr. Avery did to Teresa Halbach should speak volumes as to the kind of person that Mr. Avery is. That's why I'm very happy that the citizens of Manitowoc County won't need to worry about Mr. Avery being on their streets anymore.
So what do we say to the person who lost his law license because he was texting domestic abuse victims, telling them that he could make sure that if they were only to go out with him, that he would make sure to convict the domestic abuser for which they were accusing. What kind of person is that? Is that a person who we should think highly of as well? Just the nerve of that guy. Yesterday you asked last episode you asked if it was Judge Willis spiking the football. That was like delay of game spike right there. Legally, I suppose there's nothing you can say against it because he's reading, he's talking about it right after the verdict, and you can speak of the findings as if they're true. I think the people on this panel think differently, and we know what kind of person Ken Kratz turned out to be with regard to abuse of power. So he's got a lot of nerve. Talking about someone's sexual proclivities, in my opinion.
And to add to what Big J just said, there were other instances that we got information from where I know one woman took her 16-year-old daughter in and she had been accosted. And Kratz got really inappropriate with her right there in the office, right in front of this young girl's mother. Really inappropriate. And there were other instances too, So yeah, the nerve of the guy. He is just completely imploded his career. I mean, he should have been on his way to the AG's office after 2007. 2 major convictions for the state of Wisconsin. Right? So
that's right. He never met a camera he didn't like either.
No doubt.
It's hard for me not to think about Gregory Allen when he's saying these statements about getting criminals off Wisconsin streets. I'm paraphrasing there a little bit, but it's hard not to think about Gregory Allen and why didn't he get prosecuted for all the crimes that he did? And it took so long for that to catch up to him. Just getting off on lesser crimes consistently. I know that we haven't really covered a lot of that on this podcast, but it's one thing that just resonates with me when I hear him pointing out the evil that he says that Stephen Avery has committed.
Penny Bernson case. Stephen Avery went to prison for something he didn't do, and everybody was convinced that he did it. And lo and behold, hey, here's evidence beyond doubt that he did not do it. But in the Halbach case, investigative techniques, interrogation techniques are much better today than they were then. Around here, the feeling is Stephen Avery got what he deserved, and he is where he belongs, back behind bars for the rest of his life.
They ruined us. They ruined our business. I always thought Avery was a good name. They knocked the name right down to nothing.
This one's worse than the first one. There's no family here no more. I don't talk to hardly nobody anymore. I don't think we're going to really get over this unless he can get out.
I didn't think I was ever going to get arrested again in my life. And this, boom. It took a lot to keep my sanity. I got to prove my innocence again. Just like my first case. Once I prove my innocence, that clears me and Brendan and my whole family.
It's Jeff. To me, it's just amazing the optimism that he's able to maintain given the circumstances. I just can't imagine how I could possibly maintain any level of optimism. You know, having been through what he's been through and being where he is right now. Well, I don't mean right now. I mean in the scene. We know that he's been transferred to a medium security prison, the most dangerous man ever to set through Wisconsin courts. Been transferred to medium security because he's just a model prisoner.
That's right. You know, one of the things that I picked out of there is that this is exactly what he said in his remarks in court, that I'm going to go and prove my innocence. And that's been his plan ever since. And I think, we talk about how Stephen has said these folksy, simple things throughout this entire documentary, and this is another one. I'm going to prove my innocence, and he's been trying ever since, and he will continue. And that's where we get into MAM 2, I guess. But
I can't remember if we get into it or not, but as everyone recalls, Avery filed his pro se motion in 2013, 14, in that time frame. Said he was being surveilled, way back. So that's just one more thing to add to, proving his innocence. And we can talk more about that later as we roll in through this episode. But that's another thing. And it turns out that it was true. Kratz released that video that shows him somewhere up in, I guess on the wall, there was a camera in the privacy room, which was, as far as I'm concerned, it's completely illegal because, pastors and all kinds of people come into that room to talk to prisoners. If they're being surveilled, they can't, come on. People say, well, that was for monitoring. Well, if you're monitoring, why are you recording it? That's not monitoring. Monitoring is watching a monitor, making sure nothing happens, even though they posted guards out, jail guards outside these doors whenever people were in there. So anyway, we'll get more into that later.
You can just see the toll that all this process has taken on Alan Avery. I mean, if you look at him and some of the, in the man, so there's only, 2 years later? Or is it 3? I couldn't quite see whether or not they upped the date again. But if you just look at his demeanor, his posture, he just seems, more worn, more frail. This is the guy who etched his son's name or scribbled his son's name into cement when he was thinking about him because of his first 18-year wrongful conviction. Obviously hitting him very hard, and it's sad to see.
When you appeal it, when you ain't got no money, then they give you appellate attorneys. The appellate attorneys, they gotta find a loophole. That's what they did. It's not legal.
We are here on the defendant's post-conviction motion. We'll note for the record the defendant.
But I like you always you got the same judge, huh?
You can see that little cocky smile. He's like, got the same judge, huh? Yeah, okay, right.
All we can do is hope for the best, but I got a hunch anything will have to go to appeals court. That's my. I hope I'm wrong. Ma's got a lot of hope for a new trial.
The courtroom today was full of family and friends from both the Hallbucks and the Averys.
Today's hearing is essentially to ask the judge who presided over the trial to change his mind. Judge Willis expects to issue a written decision by December 1st. And Avery's nephew, Brendan Dassey, has also filed some post-trial motions. He'll have hearings similar to his uncle's beginning January 15th.
I know we just covered and we just said that it's the same judge, but I think that reporter just made an important point that said, this is the same judge that presided over the trial, and now they want him to basically go against what he said and and she said change his mind. Now, does that seem like a fair and just process to you guys, that the same judge would be making a judgment on the trial that they conducted? Or would it be more appropriate to have a third-party judge with clear eyes and no connection to the case to make a judgment?
Well, to me, Willis, and I'm not a lawyer, right? So you're getting what you pay for, and you get my legal opinion. But in my opinion, Willis should have recused himself. After his, and we discussed this in the last podcast, how egregiously false his statement was regarding the nature of the escalation of Avery's crime, where essentially he was, for all practical purposes, including the crime against Penny Bernstein against Stephen, right? He said, oh yeah, you know what? Now that we've convicted you of the haulback, you must have been guilty on Penny. It was almost what he said, but we know there was no escalation, and so with a level of bias that he had against Stephen, it seems to me that it would only be proper to recuse himself to, sort of eliminate the possibility of this bias, which his, ramblings at the last trial really just highlighted. That he really felt a way about Stephen that really couldn't have been true.
Agreed. And I continue to hear this word integrity thrown around in these circles, and I have to say that I don't think that this is something someone with integrity would do that. I think someone would say, I guess if you built a house or whatever project you want to talk about it, and then to have are you going to evaluate your own work, or are you going to have someone else evaluate your project to be able to get to, a logical, realistic, and a result with integrity? You're going to want a third party to look at your work. Otherwise, you're going to say every time, oh no, my work's perfect. I don't make mistakes.
Yeah, I think that you've hit on a good point, because I understand the economics of not having necessarily a third party judge having to go back through everything, because Willis allegedly knows the case, the paperwork, the motions, everything. So it's from a studying or knowing the case standpoint, I get it, but you've nailed it. What judge is going to say, oh, oops, I made a big whopper there, I should recuse myself, or I was wrong. Okay. Fox did the same thing. He really did. And in many ways, his was worse because of what got revealed in 2010 and the hearings. So I agree. I think there should be a third party, though.
They always have everything ready for me when I come. It's such a small prison, the parking lot's fairly small. You see my car drive up and they got everything out for me. Everything all set up, my badge out there. Everything all ready. It's a laugh. It's not good to be known that well in a prison.
I started writing to Stephen after watching the trial.
Sandy Greenman is a wonderful person. I did have the privilege one time of being on a podcast with Mark Hardnott with Sandy, and she is just what a trooper that woman has been, and what a strong supporter in Stephen's inner circle. If you're listening, Sandy, then props to you.
Thinking that they couldn't possibly convict this man. And then when the verdict came back, I just wanted to let him know that I supported him, and I truly did not believe that he did it.
I talked to her a few times over the phone, and then she wanted to come to Bosabel to see me, so I put her on the visiting list.
I went down there with the thought that I could be a blessing to him, and it turned out that he was a blessing to me. He helped me through a lot with my husband's illness. My husband had dementia along with Parkinson's, and Stephen helped me through it. And he always tells me it worked both ways. We encouraged each other.
It was just a friendship at that time. But Sandy, she was there for me, and she believed in me. So I fell in love with all of that. And I fell in love with her.
Several months after my husband passed away, my friends told me that there was more going on between Stephen and me than what I wanted to admit. And I remember when I went to see Stephen, I said, I've been told that there's more to our relationship. And he says to me, you mean you haven't felt it all this time? Those were his exact words. And I said, no.
She likes everything I like. Sandy's mostly the important person in my life, and let's figure my future.
On 85, they only took my brother away for something he didn't do. And they knew it. And now they took my brother away and my son. If Stephen would have did it, I think he would have confessed by now. If he did it. And he hasn't confessed. And that's what he did with the first one when they sent him away for 18 years. I believe he's still innocent. And I know my son is innocent.
Brendan Dassey is now 19 years old and spending the last part of his teenage years at Columbia Correctional Facility in Portage. Dassey's new attorneys say he should have a new trial.
The jury did not hear a lot of evidence which would have explained to them why Brendan confessed to a crime that he did not commit.
I had heard about this case from the get-go. When Stephen Avery was arrested and charged with Teresa Hallback's murder, that was big news in the innocence world. When Brendan was arrested, that was immediately on my radar screen because it was one of the first video recorded interrogations in the state of Wisconsin, and I had been involved in the litigation that led the Supreme Court to require videotaping.
Steve Drizzen has made his life work studying false confessions. So I was very pleased that somebody with the resources, the experience and the credibility, especially on confession issues, took over the case. That was huge. It was at that point I was willing to step in just to watch them work, do what they do, and to be a part of that.
What we argue in our post-conviction motion is that Brendan's pretrial attorney, Len Kaczynski, violated his duty of loyalty to Brendan. Every attorney in this country owes a duty of loyalty to their clients. It's part of the constitutional right to counsel. And what happened in this case is that Attorney Kaczynski took steps to essentially coerce Brendan into pleading guilty. And we argued that Attorney Kaczynski's behavior is absolutely intolerable, that no court in Wisconsin should sanction that kind of conduct, and that Brendan should get a new trial.
That can't be overstated enough, the duty of loyalty to the client. And it can't be overstated enough how many people worked against Brendan to try to force this plea deal. And we'll get more into that when the hearing comes up here. We'll talk more about it, but yeah, it can't be overstated enough, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't bring up O'Kelly as well, because he certainly helped set that stage quite, the same way. And really, it just seems to me that if you got to talk about professional malfeasance, that O'Kelly is equally as guilty as Kaczynski.
Absolutely. No doubt about it.
I mean, he basically called him a liar multiple times. No, that's not the story I want. I can't help you unless you tell me what I want to hear.
That's exactly what he did.
You were appointed, was it on March 7th or March 8th? March 7th.
March 7th. Okay. Did you talk to Brendan on that day on March 7th?
I don't believe I did.
Okay. However, you did talk to the press. Is that right?
Yeah, shortly after the appointment, the calls started rolling into the office.
Sure. I want to draw your attention to a news report from Channel 26 that says we have a 16-year-old who, while morally and legally responsible, was heavily influenced by someone that can only be described as something close to evil incarnate. Right?
That's what it says I said, but that wasn't me.
That wasn't me? That wasn't me?
Yeah, really, Kaczynski? That wasn't you?
Beat me
it
to
sure
it.
looked like it. I also want to point out, it showed Kretz there in the opening there to this, combing his hair, but everybody keep in mind, of course, we didn't find this out until much later, but he was in the height of this war with the DOJ, and this stuff had been buried about his sexting scandal and all that. And him arguing with, I think the guy's name is Kevin Potter at the DOJ about, keeping him on board. He's part of this whole deal with Dassey and Avery, and as part of the appeal process, they had to have him. It's ridiculous. If those that haven't read it, all that paperwork is available. These emails between Kretz and these DOJ people. I think his name is Kevin Potter.
We have a 16-year-old who's morally and legally responsible. That would, in effect, admit guilt, and that is something you should definitely not say.
Just for the record, Your Honor, Mr. Kaczynski testified that he did not make those comments, and this exhibit is being introduced as impeachment evidence to demonstrate that, in fact, Mr. Kaczynski made those comments.
The court will receive it.
Attorney Len Kaczynski immediately lashed out at Stephen Avery.
We have a 16-year-old who, while morally and legally responsible, was heavily influenced by someone that can only be described as something close to evil incarnate.
And the next day, you make the statement that if the confession is valid and admissible as evidence, it would almost certainly result in a conviction. Right?
Correct.
Okay. You still hadn't reviewed Brendan's statement, right?
No, that's correct.
The March 1st statement?
Correct.
All right. March 10th appears to be the first time you went to see him. Is that?
That sounds correct.
Okay. And when you got out from that meeting, the press was there waiting for you, right?
They were there waiting when I got there.
Okay.
Yes, they were.
All right. I want you to refer to an interview with you from NBC 26. It says that Kaczynski says at this point he hasn't ruled out negotiating a plea deal in the case, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And how did that advance Brendan's case?
Because I knew that Brendan's family was watching these newscasts. And so in effect, it was a message to try to get them accustomed to the idea that Brendan might take a legal option that they don't like. So part of the intended audience was Brendan Dassey's family. Yeah. And Brendan himself. About his only contact with the outside world was visits with his parents and the television.
Yeah.
Brendan's best
So what? How come Len Kaczynski has to send Brendan's parents a secret message through this strange?
Beat me to it.
As opposed to picking up the goddamn telephone or driving over to their house and talking to them. Why is it that
he was afraid of Barb?
That's right.
I mean, he even admitted that, right? Like, that's not speculation.
No, he did admit it, that she can be a bit of a pit bull or something like that. But, these 2010 hearings are so important. And as I said earlier, if Fox knew all this shit that gets revealed in these hearings, if he knew that in 2007, there's something really wrong. So supposedly he wouldn't find out about a lot of these backroom deals that went on between Kaczynski, O'Kelly, Kratz, the Fassbender and Wiegert. he wouldn't really find this stuff out until starting in 2009 and 2010. And he didn't correct it, and he should have.
Demonstrate that he had his own moral compass, and he wasn't necessarily the pawn of the Avery family, that he could make his own moral decisions as to what was right or wrong under all the circumstances. And part of that would be to admit being involved, in the death of Teresa Halbach.
During that meeting with Brendan on that day, he told you he didn't do this, correct?
I believe he did.
And he told you that what he said and what was in the complaint about what he said was not true, correct?
I believe he said that.
Okay. And he also told you at that time that he wanted to take a polygraph test.
Oh, correct.
That, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So Brendan is asserting his innocence.
Yes.
When he talks to you.
Imagine if you were in Brendan's position, a 16-year-old charged with one of the most serious crimes you could possibly be charged with. You're intellectually limited. You may not understand what's happening to you. You may not even understand the difference between your attorney and the police. And imagine that the one person who is supposed to defend you against the entire state of Wisconsin believes that you're guilty, despite the fact that you're telling him that you're innocent.
Yeah, I want to point out that Len Kaczynski, in the first 28 days, gave 25 interviews, either by radio or television. He spent about 10 hours doing interviews. He spent roughly an hour with Brendan. This for some perspective.
That is incredible.
That's criminal. That's disgusting.
It's like when every time when he's on the stand there, Len, and the mention of the media or an interview with the media, his reaction is a smile or a laugh or a happy. And all I can take from that is that the guy is so happy to be in the limelight. And I know this has come up with other persons in this case, is that there's this desire to be in front of the camera. And he was more focused on getting in front of a camera than he was defending his client.
Yeah, that's so true, Jeff. He was in the process of running for judge. I guess judges are elected in Wisconsin. And, I think at the time of, before Brendan's trial, he just lost an election. Right now, I believe he's a sitting judge because he finally won the election he was after. And there are people in this world who believe there's no such thing as bad publicity. So he knows the cameras are on. He's got that fake smile. You just want to slap off in a nonviolent way. And just the hole that he's digging himself. Ask yourself, what do you have to do, right? What do you have to do to get this thing declared phony, declared false, declared unfair? After all that, right? And we still have more testimony to go. But what does it take? What does it take? It just boggles the mind.
I'm with you, Big Jeff. I feel like they've already laid out enough evidence for Brendan to get a new trial, and we're only a few minutes into this hearing.
I don't know what I'm like Big J. I'm not a lawyer either, and you get what you pay for. Just the old guy on the sideline here, just thinking to myself, this guy colluded with the prosecutor, all the prosecutors, because we see the emails. He copied everybody through the entire thing, and they worked hand in hand to try to force Brendan into a plea deal. That's what they did. That was their goal. It wasn't about the truth. The May 13th coercion session, I'll call it, that was set up entirely by Kaczynski. I'm sure it was done with a plan before it ever, he ever went to see them. I know that we found out in these 2010 hearings, they had met. O'Kelly and Kaczynski had met and talked about this hearing coming up on the 12th where Falk was going to rule if the March 1st confession was going to be allowed. And they expected it to be denied because they were trying to get that removed. And so they felt like Brendan would be at his low point. This comes out, I think, in this episode here. They talk about it. And so the plan was to go after him. And this whole convoluted idea that Kaczynski could not be there, we'll get more into that. It's absolutely ridiculous. If Brendan had something to say, why couldn't that wait till Monday when Kaczynski wasn't doing his drill duties, his National Guard duties that weekend? He couldn't be available. It's absolutely ridiculous to me. Kratz allowed it because he wanted a clean confession, and that's not what he got at all.
Like, to recap a little bit, the lawyer is not present during an interview. The lawyer says on TV that his client is guilty. And the lawyer, I mean, the list keeps going. But that's the point. Like, what are we doing here? Like, Judge, are you listening?
The lawyer is turning into the prosecutor and the cops. Hey, you need to get this search warrant, but leave my name off of it. But you need to look here for this piece of evidence. But I'm not involved. Thanks. What more needs? You're right. What more needs to happen to show how much legally they did against Brendan, his own client? He absolutely destroyed. O'Kelly and Kaczynski destroyed Brendan's chance for an acquittal. Destroyed it.
Yeah, it was he had a gigantic hurdle to overcome to start with, right? And there was just no chance that he could jump over this hurdle with what O'Kelly and Kaczynski did to him. A little bit more generally, I think, Jack, you and I are pretty reasonable people, and when when reasonable people can look at something and say, "Oh my God, this is just fundamentally and outrageously unfair," but somehow there's a legal system that's saying, "Oh well, it's still legal," and that's when you have a problem, right? It's that you should be able to look at a proceeding and say that's either fundamentally fair, or maybe you didn't like the outcome, but it was fair, right? And I think in both trials, what we saw was several things that happened that were fundamentally unfair, right? And you can argue all you want about legalese, but when you look at it, you always have to ask yourself, what if this was happening to you? What if this was happening to your brother or your son or your father or your sister? Yeah. What is it fair? Would I want the state to be able to withhold this? Would I want the state to be able to deny me saying this? If it was something that was potentially true, especially if you're sitting there innocent, and the presumption of innocence should be there. Brendan never had a presumption of innocence, and he really neither did Stephen. It's when you can't see, if you just you have a problem. If reasonable people look at it and say it's unfair, and it's still being allowed that's simple as that.
I think you've said it. The reasonable person looking at this, if the jury knew everything that we know, that comes back to what we talked about in both trials. I'm sure it happens somewhat in many trials. The jury not getting to understand the full picture of what really happened, what really went on, because they say, "Oh, that's not relevant." It's like, we talked about the 4 hours that in episode 9 we talked about this interview with Brendan, but they cut an hour and 38 minutes out of it because nothing really relevant got said, except Brendan recanted almost immediately when his mom came in. Reasonable people would have come, if they knew the entire story, they would have come to a different outcome, and they weren't allowed to do that. And the process, as you're talking about, I just don't see how it's legal at all. I've never seen a case like this, and I've looked at a lot of legal cases in the U.S. I've never seen anything like this.
And again, in order for the judge to rule in favor of Brendan, he'd have to admit some kind of fault in the way that he conducted his courtroom. That's how I see it.
Well, yeah, I mean, but again, that goes back to what I was saying earlier. If he didn't know in 2007 all these shenanigans that went on behind the scenes, and he finds out in 2010, that was his chance, and that's what this process is all about: is correcting an error that happened in legalese, and he didn't do it. So either he didn't know and he didn't care and he didn't correct it, or he knew and he let it go at the time. Both are wrong, in my opinion.
Are you set to proceed, Mr. McCoy?
We are, Judge. I would call Michael Kelly, please.
Mr. O'Kelly, come on up here, take the oath, and then be seated. Sure.
Michael O'Kelly was an investigator that was hired by Len Kaczynski to give Brendan a polygraph exam.
Michael O'Kelly was the true evilness of this case when it comes to Brendan. What he did to Brendan was just disgusting, unforgivable, and by God, this guy deserves to rot in hell.
Would you categorize that as evil incarnate?
Well, incarnate just means alive, and O'Kelly seems to be alive, so yeah. The living embodiment of evil. He was in this case. There's no doubt about that. Here, here's something that we know now, right? If you follow, what Drizzt and Nyrider are doing with Brendan's case. This polygraph that we're going to talk about, I think O'Kelly, it comes back, and O'Kelly interprets the polygraph as Brendan not telling the truth. In other words, that Brendan's guilty. Since then, and I think much after the publishing of Man 2, we find out that the Innocence Project has given the results of Brendan's polygraph over to a different polygraph expert who interpreted it much differently than O'Kelly. And if it's true that O'Kelly deliberately misinterpreted Brendan's polygraph to further manipulate him, what does that say about him?
He told Brendan that he was 98% deceptive, showed 98% deception. Brendan didn't really understand it when he was talking to him. We actually read this part when we read Deplin's 91-page decision and order last night. I'd actually forgotten about it. He told him that he failed by 98%. And, what does a 16-year-old kid do? He's off in the weeds anyway. So now you got this guy standing here saying, I can't help you, Brendan, unless you tell me basically what I want to hear. It's absolute evil incarnate, that man.
But Jack, you can certainly confirm that Drizzt and Nyrider have, probably within the last 2 or 3 years, given the results of that polygraph to somebody else, and and that other expert came up with a much different conclusion.
Yes, Judge Duffin said that, I think he called it inconclusive. That what he said was that O'Kelly told Kaczynski that the results were inconclusive, but he told Brendan that he failed 98%. Showed 98% deception. It is worse. It's much worse. He flat out lied to him. It's to try to force this plea deal down his throat. Confess, we'll get you a plea deal. That whole thing that Old Dog got us this interview. It's absolutely disgusting. It's disgusting. It is a nightmare, and a lot of people can't watch it, and I understand that. But to understand the full breadth of what they did, as Kelly was talking about, this guy is a monster. I don't see, again, that goes back to reasonable people, Big J. You and I can sit and look at this and say, hey, what if this was your kid, or what if this was your brother's son or daughter that was faced with a man like this in his corner that will not believe him, will not help him because they're after Avery. That's what the whole thing was about. So
The manipulation for on behalf of O'Kelly to Brendan started the moment he walked into that room with all those pictures and that fucking blue ribbon laid out on that desk. That was a form of, you know, like I said, manipulation. He's being shown all these pictures. He's trying to make Brendan feel the way he needs him to feel to get the answers that he needs him to say. It's insane. Having Teresa's pictures there, the blue ribbon that he cries about in the courtroom. Oh God, it's just disgusting.
Well, it makes me think. Yeah, absolutely, Kel. It just makes me think back to the concept, the idea, like, is this what we want for our justice? Is this what we want in our country? Is this what we want in our state, in our county? And I hope everybody who's watching that is a resounding no. This is not what we want. This is not what we consider justice. This is not getting to the facts. This is manipulating a young man who's in over his head, who has limited intelligence. And I agree with the comments you guys made. It is one of the most evil things that I have ever seen anyone do to another person, especially to a young man like this.
I think when you get right down to it, too, Lev Kaczynski did it because of his political ambitions, right? I mean, he can go represent this guy. You're assigned a certain number of cases when you're, a lawyer. He probably had to do it pro bono, and he's like, oh yeah, I can make lemons out of this lemonade, right? I'll assist the conviction of Stephen Avery by, just taking the nephew down the road. He's not going to say no. He's too dumb to say anything different than what I tell him. So I'm just going to do it. Right? I'm going to do whatever I want. And I think that's what's going through the mind of Kaczynski.
But Mr. O'Kelly's role grew and grew in ways that, to me, highlight how Mr. Kaczynski was not interested in what Brendan had to say. He was only interested in getting Brendan to plead guilty so Brendan could be an asset for the prosecution against his uncle.
At some point, you went out and started to gather evidence, right?
Yes.
Okay. Let's go to exhibit number 64. And is that an email that you sent to Len Kaczynski?
Yes, it is.
April 27th?
That's correct.
All right. Go to the paragraph where it says, I am not concerned.
I am not concerned with finding connecting evidence, placing Brendan inside the crime scene, as Brendan will be state's primary witness. This will only serve to bolster the prosecution. Brendan's truthful testimony may be the breakthrough that will put their case more firmly on all fours.
So your goal is not only to get Brendan to confess, but to also go out and gather evidence to help the state in its prosecution, correct?
That is correct.
Even if that evidence tends to inculpate Brendan.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Now,
what?
This is like a Perry Mason moment, right? Which, yeah, it's like he's getting Kaczynski, O'Kelly, to confess on the stand to professional malfeasance, and even this confession is still not enough to say, oh, you know what, this trial was sufficiently fundamentally unfair that we should grant it. What does it take? Perry Mason moment happening right here. He's about to freaking blow up like Mount Vesuvius.
for Mr. Kaczynski at this time, right?
Yes, I am.
And you're also working for Brendan Dassey at this time, correct?
Brendan is my client, yes.
Okay. And what you're talking about here is securing evidence that would be useful to the prosecution in prosecuting Stephen Avery, and you make reference to Brendan's testimony.
That's correct.
This kind of cooperation between a defense investigator and the prosecution is unheard of. So in a sense, they were working for the prosecution. They were working for the police and working for Mr. Kratz.
You know, this is why we don't. I think sometimes in the community, the guilty stick that we throw around the word corruption a little too loosely, but it's this moment here that, although it's not corruption in terms of law enforcement, but it shows a corruption in the legal system and how damaging it was and how it became damaging to Brendan. This man who was meant to be working for Brendan was corruptedly working in favor of the other side. Where that is so beyond fairness. I agree with everything everyone's been saying. I don't understand how this moment right now shouldn't have been like, you know what, we either retrial it again or we let him out based on the fact that it was just your previous, the previous case was invalid based on ineffective counsel. If that's not the most primary definition of what effective counsel is, then I don't know what the hell is going on with this justice system, because it is just absolutely rotted at this stage.
Right. So let's talk about the definitions, right? If you have a headache and you take a pill, right, and you still have a headache after you take the pill, that's ineffective, right? But if you take that pill and the pill kills you, that's a little bit worse than ineffective, right? And that's what we're talking. If it was only infective, that might not have been so bad, right? But this is total, there's not even a word I can think of, that describes how much beyond ineffective that this is. It's just unbelievable, like you said, Kel.
This whole thing, and it really does kind of show, Kelly talked about the word corruption. These cops know that Brendan's represented with a lawyer, and they went forward with this May 13th hearing anyway at the behest of Kratz. Says, "Oh, it's okay, go ahead." They got somebody there from the defense side that's working. He's working for us anyway. It's absolutely mind blowing. This could be allowed, but I go back and think, and I've done it here more recently, admittedly. You go back and think this whole thing for Brendan really got started with this thing with Kayla at school. Some things that she said to a counselor, and it blew up from there. Of course, Candy was also in contact with Fassbender, but it blew up from that. They start questioning Brendan. He hadn't been on the radar at all for 4 months, and all of a sudden, the civil suit gets settled, and they go after him. They tried to flip others, and they wouldn't really flip. Even Jody, we learned in this interview that I got here recently in September of 2006, even then they were trying to flip her, and she rebutted basically everything they threw at her. She didn't want to be involved in it at all. And they kept after her and kept after her. This thing here with Kaczynski and O'Kelly, I've never seen anything like this. And Fox didn't correct it. It's crazy.
To build their case against Stephen Avery, while at the same time damaging Brendan's chances. And it all came to a head on Friday night, May 12th. Len and O'Kelly decide that they want to visit Brendan as soon as the court rules on his motion to suppress. If Brendan loses his motion to suppress, the confession is coming into evidence, and the case against Brendan is going to be much harder to beat. In the scope of the case, that's one of the most important decisions, and they knew that Brendan would be at his lowest point when he learned that confession was coming in.
All right, stop there. This is a picture of
a ribbon hanging on a tree?
Oh, sure, yes. I believe it's Teresa's church in the background.
Okay, and that has.
I apologize.
I'm not sure I can watch this. Oh my god.
I am blown away by that, and I think we all are. That if you can't see that this guy has been compromised, then and that this isn't enough to show you that this guy has been compromised, then what is the ceiling to prove that his interest was not in Brendan's interest?
Well, and also how bound up, apparently, I'm guessing from a political standpoint, how far they could go. And a judge, I mean, Fox seems like a reasonable judge from a lot of the things I heard him say, the rulings that he made. And yet he hears all this and he does nothing. What's going on here? How can that happen? I don't understand it, because it's not reasonable at all, not even close to reasonable. This is so far outside of a reasonable kind of thing in the legal system. We've seen some pretty big guff ups over the years, but this is terrible. I mean, this ranks right up there in the top 5 easily.
Yeah, I always have to wonder. It's almost one of these damned if you do, damned if you don't situations, right? There's a lot of people who say that electing judges is the right thing to do. How else are you going to get, some radical or idiotic or completely biased judge out of there? You appoint him for life, and boy, what a problem that is. But you have to wonder how Judge Fox is sitting up there. He's got another election coming up sometime. If he's the one who lets Brendan Dassey go, oh boy, I'll never win another one. You know what I mean? So you just have to wonder how much something like that plays into these decisions, where he doesn't have the leeway to do what he thinks might even be right because he's more worried about his political career.
I have to agree with you. I think they all look at that, because circuit court judges in Wisconsin, just like where I live in Michigan, they're elected. You have to go up to the Court of Appeals, I think, and those are chosen, appointed judges for 5 or 6 years or whatever. So yeah, I agree with you.
I'm looking at it. I agree with both of you gentlemen, but I'm looking at it in a totally different way. Like, I'm watching it and I'm having flashbacks to Amber Heard's testimony in terms of just like the what the hell is going on here moment. Like, this is so unprofessional. Like, he's made this so personal that in itself it's just not making sense. I'm questioning what I'm actually watching, because it seems so dramatic and unrealistic. Like, you get those feelings when he's crying over a woman, one, he never met, two, I don't quite get what the hell is going on with him. I don't know about you guys, but that's why it is an absolutely smash your iPad moment, because it's almost like he's still trying to manipulate. He's still trying to form that, I don't know, like this sense of, I don't know, like, I can't even explain it. This is one of the parts where I remember watching, and still from this moment, it just drives you nuts, because you can't quite understand the motive of these tears, and Judge Fox doesn't sit there and go, cut it. Like, what the hell's going on here? This is just out of the realm of reality. Like, it's not like it's your... I just can't even comprehend it to even say it. I don't know about you guys, but it leaves me speechless. This part.
It's like he's trying to create this, like he's got some personal connection to the Hall box and to Teresa, and he doesn't. He absolutely does not.
exactly what I mean. It's like this personal connection that's just not there. And like this ribbon is like the leading symbolization of Teresa. Like he turns this ribbon into this symbol of her purity and her innocence and her death. You know what I wish he had done with that ribbon?
He had that ribbon. He actually had that ribbon made up for that hearing with Brendan. He went and had that done.
Even worse. Oh, go ahead, Jeff. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay, Big Jeff. I was just going to say, is this what a mentally stable person does? I would be, if I'm the judge, I'm thinking, what is up with this guy? Is he stable? Can I trust anything that he says if he's showing this? I mean, and as you guys pointed out, he has no connection to Teresa. If he had a connection or whatever, I mean, he wouldn't be on the case anyway. But is this what mentally stable investigators do?
No, it's not. It's not. You know who had more of a connection to Teresa was the lawyer that they first gave to Brendan, right? But then they decided he was some distant relative of Teresa, so they had to get rid of him and slide Kaczynski in. Is that another man miracle that we're looking at? The guy so willing to cooperate with the prosecution. There's two more things strike me about this. First is you don't hear any objections from the from the state, which is kind of, I mean, they're probably dying. Right? They're probably listening to this and go, "Oh my God, what? I'm sunk." But not a single objection. They're just letting it go. And secondly, again, it just seems that in a trial, witnesses aren't just, you can't just call anybody up you want, right? You have to go through, you have to sit with a judge, and you have to say, well, I want to call this person, I want to talk to him, because if he says this and this and this impugns his credibility. What more could they have done? This was a double grand slam home run. This testimony of O'Kelly, because he admits to everything he did wrong and then some, and he's about to admit, I'm proud of what I did by going rogue, just because it was the right thing to do. He admits it in no uncertain terms that this, and if that's the case, why even bother having it? Why didn't the judge say, okay, well, it's not going to make any difference. It's not going to make any difference if he admits to this. You might as well not call him. Why did the judge allow him to be called? Because if there was no possible evidentiary value to his testimony, what sense does it make to call him in the first place? And it seems to me that every single piece of evidence that could have been extracted from him was extracted from him, yet it still didn't matter. How does that even make any sense? You see what I'm saying?
It's like, well, you make a really good argument, but I'm going to rule against you.
I might have to get some water during this next couple of minutes.
Can we borrow Dr. Silkman's iPad, both of them? Because I need to smash some. I get really worked up over O'Kelly. I know everyone here does, because it literally turns the legal system of what we expect and really what is written on its head, pushed the boundaries, and was allowed to pass muster with Judge Fox. And it just blows me away. I'm speechless. I'm still speechless. When I actually reviewed this episode the other night, I remember watching it and I was angry all over again.
I'm angry right now. My blood's boiling. It really is. And just listening to this guy, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah, it's. You can hear it, Jack. You can hear it in my voice. I'm also speechless. How does something like this pass is just unbelievable to me. I try to think of a time or a place, even in a fictional TV show or in a real courtroom, when an investigator can't keep themselves together. When has this happened? When has this ever been seen anywhere else? And that's what the red flag is for me, is that this guy's compromised. He's obviously not in it for the right reasons. And how is this allowed to continue? baffling.
And I think about, a few cases, close to home there. I think about, Fassbender was involved in a case, I think it was 2000 or 2001, where as a DOJ agent, he posed as a lawyer. He went undercover, posed as a defense lawyer, and became this, I guess it was he distributed CP, and they were trying to catch him. They couldn't catch him. So he posed as this defense lawyer for this guy, trying to extract information. I've never heard anything like that in my life. Well, anyway, it went to court over what he had done, and they let it go and said it was okay for them to do that, for a DOJ agent to pose as a defense lawyer to get information from a client. To me, this is often fantasy world. I've never heard of such in my life. Even to this day, I've never heard of anywhere else in the country that happened and someone was allowed to get away with it. Can you imagine if a defense lawyer posed as a police officer or whatever, some authority to try to extract information? They would throw him in jail for 10 years impersonating a police officer. But it's okay for a special agent to do that?
Where's the attorney-client privilege, right? I mean, the client, seems to me, has the expectation that when he's talking to his attorney, that communication is privileged.
That's right.
That's unbelievable. I mean,
I know. I've got the case. I still got the PDF.
All right. Now, you laid those things out prior to Brendan coming into the room, right?
Oh, yes.
All right. And this was part of your plan to get a statement from Brendan, correct?
To get admission, yes.
All right. I want to refer you to your email to Mr. Kaczynski on May 9th. Would you read from the third paragraph?
Brendan needs to be alone. When he sees me this Friday, I will be a source of relief. He needs to trust me in the direction that I steer him into. We need to separate him from fantasy and bring him to see reality from our perspective.
Was all of this done pursuant to instructions from Mr. Kaczynski?
Oh, sure, yes.
What they're doing, he needs to be alone. So what that means is we're going to ghost him. We're going to sweat him out. We're going to make him feel his aloneness, like we talked about in the last in the last episode. What a devious and immoral tactic to do to a sort of a mentally handicapped 16-year-old kid to further enable our ability to manipulate him. We're going to not talk to him, make him feel alone. We're not gonna do what he wants to do. We're gonna do what we want to do, and there is no length of stuff. There's no length of misconduct that will keep us from going to. We'll take any steps necessary to achieve our objectives. In this case, isn't that just unbelievable? It just gets worse and worse. Send me I'll double Dr. Silkman's iPad collection if you just send me.
He makes this statement and he says the purpose was to direct or steer him into the reality from our perspective. What the hell does that mean?
It's legalese word salad.
Well, it's also not necessarily reality. They don't want him. They don't want the reality. They want their reality, their constructed reality, and that's what I read out of it.
Yeah. Which is a plea deal. They wanted to steer him into taking a plea deal and testifying at Brendan's trial or Stephen's trial against Stephen. That's what they wanted. That's their reality. All of it.
It's done pursuant to instructions from Mr. Kaczynski?
Oh, sure, yes. From the first shot where you see this table where he had this picture of Teresa Halbach and the church and the ribbon. What a production, my God. The extent and the level to which he went to
course, this confession. It was just amazing. You know, it's everything that you talk about, all the methods to get an unreliable confession. It's clearly where his heart was.
Tell me how you start that email to Mr. Kaczynski on May 9th.
I am learning the Avery family history and about each member of the Avery family. These are criminals. There are members engaged in sexual activities with nieces, nephews, cousins, in-laws. Customers or their relatives unwittingly become victims of their sexual fantasies. This is truly where the devil resides in comfort. I just keep thinking about the blue ribbon. I'm sorry.
I just keep thinking about that blue ribbon. Sorry. Are you kidding me?
Is that what a mentally stable investigator?
He's crying because he's caught. He's crying because he's caught.
Absolutely, Jack. What words can you even say? How biased he was? What proof does he have of the stuff that's in this email? You know, he's as bad as Judy Dvorak, right? He's as bad as Sandra Morris. That's probably who we went to talk to find all this stuff out. Unbelievable.
I can find no good in any member. These people are pure evil. A friend of mine suggested this is a one-brand family tree. Cut this tree down. We need to end the gene pool here.
Judge, I'm sorry, I'm going to swear. What the fuck are we doing here?
It's a Perry Mason moment. He just completely admitted that he's trying to get Avery. That's his primary objective, is to put Stephen and Brennan away because the family tree needs to stop.
Imagine hearing that, like Barb and Avery sitting there listening to that, and obviously Brendan as well, and hearing that your family is being spoken about like that in terms of being utter trash, lower than trash, to the point that someone's talking about cutting a tree down to stop you all from essentially breeding, to cut you all down in your tracks. Like, I don't even want to say what I would say about that if someone was speaking about my family, yet they had to sit there and take it. Like, they showed a bit of composure, because I tell you what, get out of those doors. You wonder why Barb's screaming her head off. I would too. That is just so repulsive. You know, there is innocent people in this family. You know, Ma Avery didn't do anything. All she's ever done is stood by her family and her son's innocent, and yet he's referring to her children, her nephews, nieces as this scum of the earth. That is just revolting. And I agree, Jay Jax. He wasn't crying because he was trying to because he was emotional. He was crying purely because he'd been caught out, and he was just using tears as word salad to fill in the awkwardness of what he'd been exposed as, and that's a bloody monster.
You know, and it takes a lot of chutzpah to write the stuff down that he wrote down. Can you believe he actually was stupid enough to write that down? Irrespective of how you feel, what kind of an idiot do you have to be to write that down? So not only is it malfeasance, he's not a smart person. You got to be. You can't say that, you know, a smart person would actually put that down in an email, which he knows could be subpoenaed later. And thank God it did. And I hope he feels humiliated.
I mean, you might expect it from the other side. You might expect it from someone who is working with the prosecution to say these horrible things. But let us remind everyone This guy was working for Brendan, or was supposed to be.
Yeah, he did other things in the case too. I mean, besides this is really egregious. He did some other things too. It didn't really come out, I don't think, actually, I'm sure it doesn't. But he would go visit. He would send emails. I know on one occasion he left Appleton and drove to Manitowoc and took Scott Taddick out to lunch. Just Scott. There was no one else, just him and Scott. It's unknown what they discussed. I know he approached, I'm sure he approached the brothers in some form or another. I can't really remember all the interactions, but he did a lot of these things. And I'm not entirely sure that how much Kaczynski was in on that part of it, but we've learned since then, actually this year, it's actually been in the last few months, that O'Kelly was involved in the Kobakis case. And you guys remember that case Ripper brought to us. It's a case out of Texas or Oklahoma. And anyway, she basically got found guilty of vehicular homicide. One person died and one person got killed. But there was someone else driving her truck. But that's neither here nor there. O'Kelly was brought in to do some cell phone analysis and cell tower analysis and so forth. But then he wanted to talk to this person, blah, blah, blah. And he was told not to do that. Stay away from, you're brought here to do this. Stay away from other parts of the case. And he did it anyway. They ended up getting fired off the case. I mean, that came directly, the lawyer told us that. That's Nicole's lawyer, and that's her husband. So this guy is just a real piece of work. He gets caught, right? Oh yeah, I mean, this guy gets caught. He's caught, and this fake tears. This is all manipulation to me, as Kel said. He's trying to change the flavor of the conversation here, because he's so upset and physically or personally involved, with bullshit.
But I mean, who? To who? There's not a jury there, right? This is completely at the discretion of the judge. He thinks he's, I mean, what? I don't remember the last person that came blubbering to me, but I don't think I had much sympathy for them, especially if it's a grown man who's supposed to be, competently supporting his client, and he totally did a complete 180 in what he was supposed to do. I'm not going to take this blubbering as any type of compassion moment. I can tell you that right now.
You saw things that I think have never been seen before in a court of law. I can't think of another case where a defense attorney and his investigator plotted to pressure their client to plead guilty to a case that in which he was expressing his innocence.
That tape was somewhat disturbing, I think.
It was extraordinarily disturbing. And Michael O'Kelly is a seasoned investigator, and I believe what he did to Brendan Dassey traumatized him.
So the first question you have to ask yourself is, do you want to spend the rest of your life in prison? So is that a yes or a no? I can't hear you. Okay. Do you want to get out and have a family someday? Well, that means you have to cooperate with me and help me work with you.
O'Kelly is using these tools to break Brendan down, to get him to confess again. And he finally succeeds.
Draw a picture of the bed and how she was tied down. But draw a big size so we can see it.
And then the first thing he does is he picks up the phone and he calls Len Kaczynski.
Hi, Len. Hi, Len. This is Michael Kelly. I'm with Brendan right now. Oh, quite well. Quite well. Very well. He's given a detailed statement.
And then they arrange for Brendan to be interrogated again the next day on tape by the very same police officers who manipulated him before. without Len Kaczynski being present.
I was told by your attorney that you wanted to talk to us.
So on May 13th, these investigators, they think they're going to get gold. They think they're going to get a confession from Brendan that is going to be a game changer. It's going to have even more details. It's going to lead them to new information, and that Brendan is now going to be their star witness. But what do they get instead? They get crap.
At what point did you put her cell phone and camera and purse and stuff in the burn barrel?
I didn't.
Okay, who did?
Probably Steven.
Well, not probably. Who did? If you know, you need to tell me. You were over there.
Steven did.
Did you see him do it?
Yeah.
No, honestly, yes or no? Did you see him do it? Don't lie about it. If you did, good. If you didn't, good. Did you see him do that?
No.
This is somebody who obviously doesn't know what to say and is obviously saying whatever he thinks the officers and his defense attorneys want him to say. And the resulting story is widely different than what he said on March 1st. What's happening is he's just generating more and more conflicting statements and essentially muddying up the state's case.
So they come up with a plan, and the plan is to persuade Brendan to call his mother later that evening and to talk to her about his role in the offense.
When are you going to tell your mom about this?
Probably the next time I see her.
Because you've lied to her so far, right? Don't you think you should call her and tell her?
Yeah.
When are you going to do that?
Probably tonight.
Don't you think she'd like to hear it coming from you rather than from me? Are you going to do that?
Yeah.
When are you going to do that?
Tonight.
How will you do that? When will you tell her?
At the time that you suggested to Brendan that he call his mother, you knew that calls from the jail.
See, to me, he's given instruction that's basically a threat for Brendan. You can see him sit there, hands in his lap, legs together, head down. And to me, what a lot of people also don't know, they made him, during that May 13th coercion session, they made him write an apology to the Hallbox.
This is an example of, I hear, Big Jeff, you've brought this up multiple times, and the point that you've made was that Brendan will say whatever it takes to get you out of his face. And I felt that was a clear demonstration right there of that point where he's just, no, I didn't do it. Well, come on, you did do it, didn't you? Yeah, okay, are you going to leave now? Basically, it's just, get out of my face. I'll say what you want. You're pressuring me. I don't like to feel pressured. When are you going to call your mom? I don't know. Or when are you going to tell your mom? Next time I see her? Well, shouldn't you call her? Yeah, I guess. When? I don't know. Tonight? Like, he's just saying stuff on to the next. Just move, go. Like, leave me alone. I just want to get this over with. This feels like punishment in itself, right? The process is the punishment. And he just probably wants to get these guys get out of here. Leave me alone. And, I don't like this. And I think it's clearly demonstrated there.
Look at friggin' Fallon, as if he's got no time to read stuff. He has to read it right now during, this obvious pushing around with Brendan. And Fallon's like, oh, I don't want to look at this. I have something to read.
At the time that you suggested to Brendan that he call his mother, you knew that calls from the jail were recorded, didn't you?
Yes.
Okay. And you wanted Brendan to call his mother and to repeat what he had told you. Is that right?
Yes, for several different reasons.
One of those reasons was that you knew that if he did that, that conversation could be introduced against him in court. Is that right?
No, it was not our thought at that time. Our thought was we were dealing with Barb constantly. She would be on our side, she'd be with us to help us, and then she would be mad at us, things like that. We wanted Barb's cooperation. That was the purpose of that.
Did you suggest to Brendan that perhaps, if that was your objective, that he might ask his mother to come to the jail to speak to her about that?
Did I ask Brendan to do that?
Yeah.
No.
Basically, what you said here was that unless he called her that night, that you would tell her. Isn't that right?
That's true, yes.
And so Brendan complied. He went back to his cell and he called his mother on the recorded prison telephone. And he said to her, "Mom, Michael O'Kelly and Mark Wiegert think I'm lying. They told me if I say I did this, I won't be doing life in prison. And I might even get out to have a family. Those are things that didn't come from the police. Those are things that Michael O'Kelly told him." So Brendan is explaining to his mother, my defense team is telling me I need to say I did this. And that's what he tells his mother. He says, "Mom, I did some of it." And she says, "Brendan, how could you possibly have done some of this? I saw you at home at 5:00 p.m. on October 31st. You weren't over at Stevens. You were at home." And he says, "Oh, well, I went back to Stevens after I saw you." That's important because the state used that May 13th recorded telephone call against Brendan at trial. And it would have never come about, absent the actions of Attorney Kaczynski.
They weren't supposed to use those statements. There was a gentleman's agreement that this was a lost weekend because Len Kaczynski allowed Brendan to be interrogated without counsel. But they used them. They got greedy. And they used them in a way that was very powerful and persuasive to the jury and almost ensured that Brendan would be convicted.
And when he got back at 5:00, he could have told his mother. As we know in the call, and as she rightly noted, I would have put you in the car and we would have left. But he goes back. We know he goes back because he tells his mother in those phone conversations 10 weeks later on May 13th and May 15th that he went back, that he was there.
They set Brendan up. Who's there for Brendan? He's all alone. And that's the main reason why he deserves a new trial, is because the actions that his own attorney and his investigator took so damaged his chances of ever winning this case that he needs a do-over.
You can't say any better than what he just said right there. They so damaged his case. They destroyed him. You know, and that's another thing. I really don't understand how Fox could allow the fruits of that weekend to have been used anywhere. That should have died on the vine. But he allowed that phone call to come in. And I really don't, legally speaking, I don't really understand that.
We are about halfway done with this episode, guys, and I think it's that time to hit the wrap-up comments and put this one in the books. Big Jeff?
I have to say that my blood has not boiled so hot on any episode as it has in this episode. The actions of Kaczynski and O'Kelly, I think we said it earlier, are just the embodiment of evil. It's unbelievable you can do that to another person and get away with it, and then confess to it and continue to get away with it. I mean, if this were today, and Barb or Brendan had any money, they probably could sue O'Kelly and Kaczynski for, at the time, I'm sure statute's going now, but for professional malfeasance. And just what they did was wrong and inexcusable. They should lose their license to practice anything to do with law enforcement or law, period. But because of their actions on this trial, only thinking about themselves, just unbelievably coercive, corrupt, and anything you want to throw at it was, and any bad word you want to throw at it is probably quite appropriate. So with that, I'll pass it along. I just can't think of anything else to say.
Thank you, Big Jeff. Jack, give us your wrap up.
Kaczynski, O'Kelly, their actions were deliberate, with intent for personal gain. They did not have Brendan's best interest. They failed him at every turn. There's no direction of anything that I could see. Yeah, Kaczynski did write a few things to try to get some relief for Brendan and various things, but the underlying thing was that they tried to force this 16-year-old kid to take a plea deal and to testify against his uncle at trial. They didn't believe him, or they chose not to believe him from that direction, but it was still, again, they colluded with Kratz, Gahn, Fallon, Fassbender, and Wiegert to work against their own client's interest. Kaczynski ended up losing, I think he lost his bar card for 4 months. I think that's right. But to me, he should have never been able to practice law again after what he pulled. It was not enough. Of course, you can hand it to the OLR for, I call them chicken shits or us, because the stuff that they do and the way that they handle a lot of these bad lawyers in Wisconsin is unbelievable. Unbelievable. So I agree with everything Big Jeff said. Any bad word you can think of about throwing at this is probably appropriate. That's all I got.
All right, Kel.
Yeah, I actually am a little bit surprised myself in this episode. I went into it thinking that it was just going to be a little bit flat episode, just summarizing the emptiness of, I'm going to say, 3 innocent lives lost in this whole scenario. And here I am feeling those angry emotions again. Watching O'Kelly again has really stirred up the inner anger, frustration, disappointment of the system, of the whole scenario. I'm still lost for words. It was a horrible episode, to be quite honest with you. And and I think what's making it worse is we know the outcome. We still know the outcome. The men are still in prison. So we're watching this knowing that all this unethical shit has been done, and there's still no justice. Not yet anyway. I guess I'll see you all next week, and thank you everyone for watching. And that's all I got.
Thank you, Kelly. I don't think I could have said it better myself. Appreciate everybody on the panel, Big Jeff, Jack, and Kelly. Everybody out in chat, appreciate you guys watching along with us, even though this is maybe the hardest one. I think I'm going to label this as a perfect 10 of the iPad Smash rating system that I just invented. And I will just a reminder to everybody to please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Share it on your social media. It's the most effective way to support the channel. And again, thanks to everybody out there. This has been Discussing a Murderer.